Well, I came home and I went to the Buddhist shrine at my house and I prayed over it. And I just made a simple declaration. I said, Buddha, I don't serve you anymore. I serve Jesus. And then my mom and dad were sleeping in their bed, and I just said a silent prayer over them. I said, Lord, I just commit them to your hands, and I pray that they would know you like I know you now. And then I went to bed. Next morning I came in, it was early, and my dad looked at me without even saying anything, Alicia, and said, you became a Christian last night.
Welcome to Faithly Stories, the podcast that brings you inspiring tales from conversations with church leaders as they navigate the peaks and valleys of their faith journeys through their ministry work and everyday life. Join us as we delve into their challenges, moments of encouragement, and answered prayers. The Faithly Stories podcast is brought to you by Faithly, an online community committed to empowering church leaders, pastors, staff, and volunteers. Learn more at faithly.co. Get ready to be uplifted and inspired as we unveil the heart of faith through stories from the front lines of ministry on the Faithly Stories podcast.
Kay, welcome to Faithly Stories. It is such a pleasure to have you here with us today. You are a netweaver of relationships, and you really sit at the intersection of relationships and leadership and capital and faith. You've worked in corporate, you've planted 2 churches, you've worked at investment firms, you still work at investment firms.
Yeah.
I think that just in saying all of that, I'm starting to develop an idea of what a netweaver might be. But let's start.
It's a person that can't hold a job. That's basically it, Alicia.
Or a person that has so much to offer, they need more than one job. But look, maybe we could start from the beginning, Kay, and talk a little bit about what your faith journey has been like, how it started and led you to some of these different jobs.
Of course. No problem, Alicia. Thank you so much for having me on with Faithfully. I just a great admirer of your work and your passion and your vision to actually do this. It's a long time in coming. And so in the way you've constructed it and built it, engineered it, praise God that God's using you through this. So a little bit about my background. My name is Kay Hiramine. I'm Japanese American. I was born in California. My parents immigrated over from Japan in 1956, and I was born in the United States in California. So I grew up in a Buddhist home. And so for me, really foundationally, didn't know anything about God, was not really aware of God. I saw churches around, but I never went into one because we had a little Buddhist shrine at our house. And we would pray to it 3 times a day, and we would burn incense and put fruit on there as a sacrifice. I mean, we were doing ancestral worship, so we had pictures of our family members there. And so for me, my faith journey is pretty wild. So outwardly, like most typical Asian Americans, not to generalize, but we're kind of super overachievers. Education is really an idol in Asian homes. So we really push education as the way to be successful or image or face, Asian cultures are mostly honor shame cultures versus Western is more guilt, right and wrong, right? So it's got to look good. The family's got to look good. And that's done through the expression, typically through education and higher education and such. So outwardly, I was a very successful student, Alicia, and 4.0, AP honors, all that stuff. And yet inside, I was just dying. An extracurricular, I was checking all the boxes because I was heading off to Ivy Leagues or whatever academies I was looking at as well. But inwardly, I was just dying. And so I started reading in my junior year in high school, Camus, Nietzsche, really some nihilistic writings, typically. And if you go through the logical progression of nihilism, existentially, it leads to why exist, why even live. And so, man, I was going down that dark road of, just going, man, what is my purpose in my life? And even at 17, I was questioning that. But through an encounter that I had, which is probably another podcast, I came to Christ pretty radically at an event that was actually a secular event for student leaders. This would be 1980, so it's a little bit of date. Yeah, I'm 60 years old, so this was in 1980. August 1,
60,
1980.
60 years young, Kay.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And so, came off that mountaintop experience, with an encounter with the Lord. And I started searching. I was like the person looking for the pearl of great price. I knew it was out there. And man, I wanted to find it, and I wanted to find Jesus. So within about 5 or 6 months, I was able to come into a relationship with the Lord, excuse me. Um, and, and my father, so I'll put it in progression. So I started attending Bible studies, and then my father started seeing I was getting more serious because I was going to church, and he just finally said to me one Saturday, he goes, Kay, if you're getting really serious about this Christian thing, we're Buddhists. That's who our family is. That's our identity. And if you become a Christian, who's going to pray to me when I die? Ancestral worship. And you're the only male, so it's even more important because we're not going to give it to our daughters. Typical progression there. And I just was like, yeah, you're right. I'm not going to make that sacrifice, because he was threatening to kick me out of the house. I had to change my last name. So it was a total shame thing on me. So that was Saturday. Sunday, I go to service, and I walk into service. And by then, I become really good friends with my youth pastor, who I'd been going to Bible studies with and everything. And I wanted to tell him what my dad said, and that I could not come back to church or Bible studies and things like that. And so my pastor at the time, David, came walking up after worship, and he goes, "Hey, Kay, how you doing?" Gave me a big hug, and hey, we're going to have lunch. I said, "Well, I need to talk to you about something pretty serious. My dad laid on me." And he goes, "Okay, but before you say that, I want to share with you what the Lord was impressing upon me during service, during worship." I said, "Okay, what is it?" And he goes, "Kay, the Lord impressed upon me to give you a scripture which says, 'Whosoever gives up mother, father, brother, fields in my name for the sake of the gospel will receive 100-fold. And that's all I got. I was like, "Oh my gosh, seriously?" I said, and I told him, I said, "David, this is what my dad said." And so I shared with him. He just started crying, hugged me, and said, "Well, you have a decision you need to make. And so I'll be praying for you." So for that whole next week, I struggled and really wrestled with the Lord, ran away from him, started drinking again, all this stuff, partying that whole week, because I just was avoiding to make a decision. But Friday rolled around, and I was ready. So I went in for prayer I went down to my pastor's house, and he always had it open. It was wild times, right? So he lived in a, quote, wrong part of town. He was a bivocational pastor. And so he was a mechanic as well as a pastor of this church that was just starting a church plant. And his front door was always open. He had homeless people staying with him, on the couch, And he had a back room, though, where people would go in there. And I was like trying to avoid the back room, because everybody goes in there, it comes out, wouldn't party with me anymore. They weren't any fun anymore. I was quite the hellion, younger days. But I went in the room, and for the next few hours, he led me to the Lord and prayed for me. Well, I came home, and I went to the Buddhist shrine at my house, and I prayed over it, and I just made a simple declaration. I said, "Buddha, I don't serve you anymore. I serve Jesus." And then my mom and dad were sleeping in their bed, and I just said a silent prayer over them. I said, "Lord, I just commit them to your hands, and I pray that they would know you like I know you now." And then I went to bed. Next morning I came in, it was early, and my dad looked at me without even saying anything, Alicia, and said, "You became a Christian last night." And I was shocked because I hadn't said anything. And I said, "How do you know?" He goes, "I can tell. What happened?" And in the Bible it says, deep speaks to deep. Nothing's hidden, right? And so I was like shocked, but not surprised, because I just felt totally different. I had a joy and a hope in my heart now, and a peace, which is so important. And he escalated in his anger. He had a lot of anger issues. He was alcoholic. He had, very abusive in many ways to my mom and my sisters and I. So it was a very dysfunctional home. But he wasn't drunk that morning. But he got escalated in anger over 2.5 hours, and finally threatened to kill me with a knife and kick me out of the house. And David had to pick me up in his car. And so I stayed with him for a while until we reconciled enough where I could come back home. But my father and I didn't talk for a long time. had to go through my mom, or he'd say very gruff things to me. Then I went off to college. Okay, so that's kind of my life journey with Jesus in a nutshell. So in college was really formative. And for me, it's very foundational in my walk with Jesus. And two books, other than the Word, obviously, the Bible, two books that really were foundational in my walk as a leader and a follower of Jesus was The Cost of Discipleship and Life Together, written by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And it was such a radical experience in this campus group that we actually even bought homes as students near the campus. We bought cars so that people could use them collectively, so people who couldn't have transport. We did street ministry and mercy ministries to the homeless in the area. And even racially, we were going across, because pretty white school, to be fair. And as a multi-ethnic expression of who Jesus is, we were out there in the community, which was largely Hispanic, there in Occidental College, which is in Eagle Rock, California. From there, I really wanted to go into ministry, and I felt like the Lord called me to ministry, Alicia. And I just was like talking to my elders of my church. At that time I was going to Glendale Presbyterian Church in Glendale, and I asked my elders. I said, "Hey, I really sense a call to ministry. Can you process this with me as my elders?" And the three of them sat me down and they said, "Hey, okay, there's obviously a call to leadership on your life, but there's a lot of pastors that don't really know what real life is about." I said, "Well, what do you mean by that?" They go, "Well, they go from Bible college and then they go to seminary and then they get a call to a church, but they've never worked a day in their life in the secular world." I was like, "Oh." They said, "Would you commit to 5 years in the secular world and then we will deputize you to go to seminary from here?" I said, 5 years, I'm submitted to leadership. These guys were very wise and godly men. And I just said, great. One guy was a guy named George Barna, who started Barna Research. This church was amazing. Another one was a guy named Bill Gregg III, who had Gospel Light Publications, Regal Books. And then the third one was a friend of mine named Ralph Winter, who's a executive producer in Hollywood. Did all the X-Men and all kind of stuff. So they were only about 4 or 5 years older, but I really respected them. So I went and started looking for a job, and my first job was at Procter and Gamble, little mom and pop company out of Cincinnati, and I was in sales with them. And then met my wife. They wanted me to move to Cincinnati. I wasn't willing to go and live in Cincinnati. Plus, I don't really like Skyline Chili, which is what they're famous for in Cincinnati. And I don't like the Reds because I'm a Dodgers guy. And so worked for Coldwell Banker Commercial Real Estate for 2 years. And then at the end of the 5 years, just as promised by my elders, I went to Fuller Seminary. So Fuller Seminary is a theological seminary, and I was in the School of World Missions in Pasadena. Hope I'm not boring you on this, because I can tell you.
No, I'm just, it's taking all my self-control not to break in with a million questions.
No. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, like in your 5 years working in the secular world, working in corporate, were you enjoying it? Or were you like sort of counting down the clock and going, no, I'm like anxious to go to ministry, anxious to get started?
At first, yeah. I mean, remember 21 years old, getting sucked into this corporate America thing, great salary, wearing suits, yada, yada, yada. It was very seductive in that standpoint of the world. However, because of my foundation in my college years, we really lived a life of simplicity. So during those times, I actually lived with 4 other people, and I supported them completely in their ministry. And basically, I paid for the apartment. There's a 2-bedroom, so we all lived together. And so I financially supported them, as well as basically buying groceries and stuff too as well. So I basically took care of these folks who were part-time folks. They also had jobs, but I was kind of the lion's share of the finances. And that's how I saw we lived in community, life together, right? And so I was still very committed in those years to do that, at least for the first year and a half. And that really also made me become and started an awareness of that there's no difference between the sacred and secular, that all people are called to ministry, right? Whether you're a full-time worker, as a pastor or missionary. When you're in business, you can be a minister of the gospel, that you're sharing Jesus by the way you do your work. So that faith and work is really, I love this new expression that's happening in the church right now, is super important. So back in remember, this is 80s, right? So 87, 88. So for me, I was there was no nomenclature, there's no language around faith at work, and it's just so exciting to see how that's developed.
Cool. Wow. I'm looking behind your shoulder, by the way, to see if there's like 7 other families living with you, because even from like the beginning of your story, talking about like the pastor at the church plant where you went, like the doors were open, right? To hearing about how you lived in your years in corporate, like with others, right? Supporting them, supporting one another. I can't help but think of the Acts Church. And I have a feeling that sort of theme just runs through your life and through your ministry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one of the most important decisions that you can make in your life is your spouse. And you want that spouse, that partner, to run at the same speed and intensity with you in your walk with Jesus. Otherwise, you're either dragging them into something they don't feel called to, or they're running ahead of you that you're trying to keep up with. And so really praying that God would bring that equilibrium together is super important. And so my wife, Julie, we've married 35 years. We have 5 daughters, 2 son-in-laws, and our first grandbaby girl. But Julie, what I was so attracted to Julie about was her passion for Jesus and to be open to whatever the Lord has. I'm a high risk taker for me. Okay, so that's kind of my personality type, Alicia. So I was looking for a woman that I could really walk with, run with, and really do ministry with, whether it's in the secular world, business, or in a full-time ministry. She's more pastoral than I am, bluntly. When people come to me for pastoral counseling, I'm like, okay, let's take it to the cross. Let's pray about it. Just nail it to the cross. Don't pick it up. Leave it there. And if they come back again, I go, you're an idiot. What the heck's going on? I have very low mercy gifts. Now, my wife, though, if you set up an appointment with her, she'll be like, well, let's read this book together and have 7 sessions to talk through it and pray together. I'd be like, so I am not that kind of person, pastorally. She's much more pastoral than I am. Anyway.
So you went to seminary finally after 5 years.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
It was awesome. I really enjoyed seminary because after working 80 hours a week, basically in business, and was somewhat successful from the world's eyes, but inwardly I was really yearning to grow in my discipline theologically as well as missiologically, and really doing church planting. That's what I really felt like. And whether it was overseas or not didn't really matter. Julie and I really felt a call to do that. Back then, church planting was kind of the buzzword, but it could also mean missions as well. So we went to School of World Missions, now called Intercultural Studies at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena. And at that time, I needed work. So I became a teaching assistant for a professor there named Dr. C. Peter Wagner, which was a church growth professor at that time. And then he later wrote a number of books on prayer and spiritual warfare, and mobilized what was called the 1040 window, missiologically, just prayer for the 1040 window, the unreached people groups around the world. So I was his TA, which was a super exciting time. Pasadena in those early 90s was such a vibrant place for missions and unreached people groups. So we had the U.S. Center of World Missions with Ralph Winter. Joshua Project was up there doing analysis and research on unreached people groups and trying to find out where they are. We had the Center for Buddhist Outreach. There was a number of things, Muslim, on and on. There was a vibrancy. And then, of course, Fuller, we would have people from all over the world coming who were leaders being primed to take over their movements or denominations back home. So, yeah, it was just an incredible time of vibrancy and relationships and such. But at that time, Julie and I actually started a Bible study. Like, we were like, okay, we're coming out of the varsity, you start a Bible study, right? So we started inviting Bible study. But what was so interesting, everybody we invited didn't come, but they told someone else to come. And a lot of them were not even saved, which was awesome. We were like, oh, great. We can lead them to the Lord, And by the end of about, I'd say 4 or 5 months into it, we had over 80, 90 people showing up, 100 people showing up on our 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor in Pasadena, South Pasadena.
Where did everybody sit?
On the balcony, on the floors. We actually had people sitting in the stairwell going up and down, and I'd have to share the message with 1 foot inside the door and also 1 foot in the stairwell. And all our neighbors would open their doors. They're elderly people, and they loved it that they could listen to these young people singing, and I'd share a message. So we had worship for a few songs. I'd share about 15 minutes because that's about all I had. And then, and then I'd give an invitation, because you always give an invitation, right? And then people started getting saved. I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And then, so we baptized them, and then we'd eat together. And it was hilarious, Faithfully. So, Faithfully, Alicia. So it was an amazing time in that God was moving during that time in my life, Julie's life. And we started plugging them into small groups, right? That's what you do in a varsity, put them into small groups, and with the women and with that women, and the men with the men. And we just separated. So we had 30, 40 people in each small groups, and multiple small groups. So it got to the point where I had asked my professor if I could please, get an extension. And he goes, well, Kay, you never asked that. He's the dean at the time, Dean Pearson. And he goes, Kay, why are you asking about getting an extension? I said, well, I got this Bible study and it's really busy. And he goes, well, tell me what this Bible study. So I shared with him. And he goes, well, Kay, do you take an offering? I go, no, I don't take an offering. Why would I take an offering? It's a Bible study. And he goes, you planted a church. I said, no, I didn't plant a church. He goes, yes, you did. He goes, you planted a church. He goes, how many people are getting saved? I said, well, I told him, 80 people. And he's like, hey, he goes, why did you come to Fuller? I said, well, I'm going to be a church planter. He goes, okay, you don't need to be here anymore. He goes, this is the dean of, this is my, And I said, well, Dean, he goes, you should just leave and just keep at your church. I said, I can't do that. I'm Asian. We don't quit at school. And he started laughing. He goes, okay, well, that's an idolatry. But he goes, Kay, you have planted a church. And if you don't believe that, you're in denial. And there's a great professor over at the School of Psychology where we're going to send you, Sun Yun Tan. And he goes, he's going to help you walk through this. But first, we got to get you legal. So he literally called up a lawyer in Pasadena. And he goes, yeah, Steve, hey, I'm sending a young man over and his wife. They're going to come over. They're planning a church in South Pasadena area, and you need to help them get organized. And he actually helped pay for some of the cost of it was an incredible time. God's provision and just affirmation and confirmation in that. Well, that church is called Vision Christian Fellowship, which is still going in Pasadena, California. They just bought a building across from Pasadena City College there on Colorado Boulevard. And my friends that we planted the church with, so to speak, they are now the senior pastors and lead that for the last 30 plus years. Because we left California in 95 with the ministry that we were with at the time. So I did ministry stuff. But you have a question or something like that? I'm sorry.
Well, no, I'm just, I'm like silently marveling here and reflecting on what you said. You went to Fuller to learn how to church plant, and you planted a church and didn't realize it.
By accident.
It's just kind of amazing.
Well, it's the sovereignty of God. I mean, really. I mean, I tell people, if I shouldn't be surprised, because if God can use me, he used, Balaam's donkey. So, why should I be surprised? But I did keep taking a course there. I was still a TA for Peter Wagner, Dr. Wagner. And then he invited me to be a part of his ministry. And so I was his executive director for a number of years, moved to Colorado Springs, helped raise $10 million for the World Prayer Center in Colorado Springs on the New Life Church property in Colorado, and was with him from 92 to 99. And then after that, I've done a number of things. I'll go highlights here because I know we're going, sorry about that long story of that, but I thought it'd be helpful for those listening. So after that, I had a transition time, which is always the painful time. I left the ministry and I didn't know what I was going to do. So I was really like searching and trying to figure it all out. So that was a 2-year time frame of just really seeking the Lord. Um, and I think God used that time to really kill me with a lot of pride and arrogance that had developed over being really successful in business and in ministry. And because in the ministry, we grew by leaps and bounds into the millions of dollars a year, doing conferences for 10,000 people, yada, 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 hanging out in the green room with all these Christian celebrities and cutting deals with them and publishing their books. And I mean, I did a number of things like that, and it just got really heady. And I'd say spiritual pride is like bad body odor. Everybody else smells it except you. And I had it pretty bad, Alicia. Yeah. And so God, I think, really needed to do some soul surgery in my life. And I needed to come to the Lord and die to self in those areas. And after that, I started a consulting company that worked with the U.S. government in different areas, like how to engage the church in private sector, nonprofit, and businesses, small businesses, and large business. We worked with large business like Federal Express, Walmart, Citibank, Delta Airlines, and such, Home Depot. How did they work with the U.S. government during a disaster? This was in 2001. And so my team, I'm not smart enough, so is my team that I brought together in my company, we wrote the white papers for that, which eventually became what's called the Private Sector Integration Office, which later evolved to the Faith-Based Community Initiatives Office. So that's kind of the genesis of some of that, how we were able to play a small part in helping the church be able to engage with the government in those areas. So that was my for-profit company. And then I had a nonprofit that we started because of our conviction to help the poor out of James 1:27. So true religion undefiled before the fathers, ministering to widows and orphans in their distress and remaining unstained from the world. And James 1:27 was the guiding thing for our humanitarian organization, which was secular. It wasn't a faith-based organization because we want to work in the world, not become of it, but in it. And we did disaster response and sustainable development. And we had an impact fund of about $1 million a year in about 80 nations. And we raised up about 880 small, indigenous, local disaster response agencies to build their capacity to work with UN agencies during a disaster. So that was super exciting. We started over, I think, about 20,000, 25,000 businesses, micro businesses, and we funded a ton of things like that. That was my humanitarian world. And then I had my for-profit world that, like I said, I worked for the U.S. government and also worked for corporations as well. After that, that lasted till 2012. And then since then, I've been doing a lot of different consulting at pretty high levels with organizations, not high level, but meaning at a strategic level with CEOs and corporations on international expansion, because I have a lot of connections overseas, specifically in Asia in particular. I'm pretty strong. But I know pretty much folks everywhere through my long life that I've had, that God's given me. And then one thing that's been really interesting in my life has been just different diversity of things that I've been involved in. So everything from nonprofits to faith-based groups to for-profit companies, both big and small, to large corporations, U.S. government. So I have a lot of experience in those different areas of sectors. And it's given me a great purview into how they operate and look. And I'm a very curious person. I love learning about cultures, love people. Kingdom of God is all about relationships. And so for me, just learning in the context of culture is really super important, whether it's a corporate culture or whether it's ministry, it's super important for that. And one big chunk of my life that I've spent a lot of time that God's really been working on me is the whole area of generosity. So I work for an organization called Generous Giving, which basically helps people in their areas of generosity, people of high capacity. So we've ministered to over 50, 60,000 high net worth individuals across the United States that have gone through a study that we do called the Journey of Generosity. You can look it up. It's super cool. It's only like one night long. And it really helps them to recapture the joy because, folks of means, people with wealth, people in churches that have finances, they're often hit up all the time. They feel like an ATM machine. And the Bible says that we're supposed to be a cheerful giver, but it's hard when it happens over and over again, that all you're being hit up for, you're known for, is a person's going to cut a check. And that's just torture to the soul for them. And yet, because see, they're conflicted. They believe that God wants them to be joyful, but yet they know they're called to create wealth, but yet they feel like they're being used or manipulated by it. And so there's an inner conflict. And what this study, generous giving, really does is come alongside people to say, you can actually be joyful. And these are some sort of inspirational stories that you can ask the Holy Spirit to speak to you of what an area of your life that needs to not only die to, but also aspire to in light of how God's created you to be with you and your family. And there's a sister ministry called Generosity Path, which I also worked for 4 years with, which mobilizes people of high net worth and such all over the world. I think they're in over 60 nations now, but I helped open up all of Asia and raised up local workers there to help carry the work there. So Korea, Japan, Indonesia, Singapore, Cambodia, Vietnam, Australia, New Zealand, a few other countries I help open up there. So yeah, so generosity is a big deal for me.
Wow. So I can't help but be struck by how you weave things together, or how the Lord uses you to weave things together, crisscrossing geographies, crisscrossing, industry, faith, nonprofit. Was it those experiences that led you to say, "Hey, I'm a net weaver"? Like, how did that come about? Because when someone looks for you online, that's what they find. They find Kay, net weaver of relationships.
Yeah. I believe God calls everybody to relationships. We were created to live in community, not only with a spouse, Adam and Eve, with God in the garden. Obviously, it starts with God, and then Adam and Eve, your spouse, through your family, your community, your church, and then culture. So we're all created to live within community. And those that are feeling isolated, I just want to encourage you that God can help you through that time of isolation. You feel like you're being isolated, and it really is a lie from the devil, bluntly, to isolate and marginalize you, because he likes picking off people one by one. But when you come together, it says one will put 1,000, two will put 10,000. So I want to encourage someone out there right now that's feeling isolated and marginalized or feeling very alone to step out by faith, ask God to give you even the courage to call someone and just get together with them and pray together. Okay, net weaving. So net weaving for me is all about relationships. The greatest gift you can give a friend is a friend. And I just feel that, and since the Lord wanted to rebuild his kingdom through relationships rather than hierarchy and structures per se. You need structure, you need systems and processes. I get it. I ran a change management company for 4 years, so I understand change management. So a little bit. At least I had other smarter people tell me the clip notes. But all that to say is God has called us to be in a relationship. I'm naturally very curious about people, like I shared earlier. So I lean into it. But it's also, there's a level of expectancy that God is going to surprise me with something that I'm going to be really joyful about and excited about. Because each person has a story. And that story is not just their story to share, but it's also a story for me to participate in. How can I come alongside a person in their journey and their story? We're all on journeys. We're all sojourners, as it says in the Bible. And sometimes there's times when God brings us together in the intersection of relationship built through a sacred trust, I call it, that something just spiritually magical happens. Not magical in a bad sense, but it's almost mystical when you can help and serve people and not expect anything in return. I say that networking's very transactional, but net weaving is transformational, not only for that person, but also for yourself. And so I love connecting and making those relationships happen. And the genesis of the term...
Maybe I could just break in and say that, like since the time that you and I were introduced, I've gotten an email from you once a week, once every other week, saying, "Hey, Alicia, meet this person. Alicia, talk to this person. You two have to get to know each other." So you really walk what you talk. I just wanted to put that out there.
Thanks, Alicia. Yeah, I love doing that, especially for friends. But I do it for everybody. I mean, I'm kind of known as the netweaver of relationships, but I don't think it's a unique call or gifting for just me. I believe we all have varied levels of netweaving. And really ultimately it comes down to trust. Because so often people build silos of relationships where they're like, oh, they're my relationships, especially when it comes around money or donors or people who give. I see that a lot. And I tell them, you're living in a lack mentality. God calls us to be in an abundance mentality, in that God owns everything. And even as you give away, he replenishes and even gives you even more to give away. So how much more so, which is the most valuable in the world, is relationships. It's not gold. It's not silver. It's not fiat money. It's not all that other stuff that we call cattle in this world, but it's relationships. I have a phrase. I say, the only thing that's going to get you in heaven is not what you know. It's who you know. I mean, when we're in heaven, we're not going to talk about the cars we had or the extra house we had or the boat we had, or we're going to talk about, man, I met this awesome individual named Alicia Lee. She does this amazing project called Faithfully that helps so many pastors and full-time workers find purpose in their lives. That's cool. Oh, by the way, that's the person over there at the banqueting table. And that's the other person over there. And all those people that were impacted by that person because they found purpose in their life with Jesus. And 10,000 people in their community came to know the Lord because of that person. Because faithfully helped them find that vocation or that placing. It's just those kinds of things. I mean, faith, when I looked at faith, I was really interested in that. In some ways, it's elements digitizing the whole aspect of netweaving, right?
Yep.
It's a platform for that.
Yeah.
In some ways, I don't want to project that on you.
But... No, that you are 100% spot on. It doesn't replace net weaving. It's meant to help enhance it, to take all the net weaving that you've been practicing and that you tell others to do, to amplify it even just a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was sitting with a friend of mine named Ken Coleman. I don't know if anybody out there listens to Dave Ramsey shows and stuff, financial plan. He's one of their tops, whatever faces, or, he has his own show and all that. He's also in Fox News business commentator, contributor, very interesting, become a really good friend of mine. And he sat me down for the first time. He had heard about me moving into Franklin, Tennessee. I live in Middle Tennessee, now just south of Nashville. And he had heard about me from 5 people. And he said, so we finally sat down and he sits me down, and he's just very much of a provocateur, very smart when it comes to interviewing. I mean, he's interviewed over like 10, 15,000 leaders, right? So he's super sharp. And he goes, Kay, describe one word that would describe you. And I said, I'm a netweaver. He said, whoa, I've never seen anybody that fast. Explain that. And I said, well, have you ever seen a Middle Ages Renaissance tapestry? Those wall hangings. Have you seen those, Alicia? They're beautiful, right?
Yeah.
And I said, have you ever seen the back of one? Have you ever seen the back of one?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just a hot mess. I mean, it has no reflection of the front. Mm-hmm. In fact, in some of these hangings, they have a piece of wood because the 2 strands didn't connect. It's so funny. I said, I'm a netweaver. I'm behind the scenes. I netweave different people's stories, which is these beautiful threads. And I netweave them together, connect them, and then it becomes a tapestry of life, which is the story of Jesus.
Mm.
And he goes, oh my gosh, okay, that's a book. And what's weird about it is in the previous 3 months, I've heard from 5 different people that I was supposed to write a book. I'm like, oh no, I don't got anything to share. He goes, Kay, you're a netweaver. He goes, your stories are just, on and on about how God, and I call myself a Forrest Gump of relationships. I just stumble into it, and it just happens. And but it's because I believe that God sees my heart, and that I just want to make that happen and make those connections happen. That really adds value to people's lives, so that they can walk with the Lord even closer. Or if they don't know God, help them along in their journey. anyway, all that to say is, so I'm in the process of writing it now. So I'm writing this book called Netweaving, and just really praying that it'll be a blessing to folks.
So let's talk a little bit about the book. I know you're still writing it, but give me a sense of what you're hoping to achieve with the book. Are you hoping to help people to learn some of the fundamentals of net weaving if it doesn't come as naturally to them as it does to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Because some people say, well, Kay, you're such an extrovert, that's easy for you. Relationships, like I said from the very beginning, God created us all to be in relationship. And whether it's 5 people or 500 or 5,000, or like I have 14,000 people on my iPhone, right? So, a lot of people. Check out my LinkedIn.
Do you have to buy a different drive to store all those contacts?
Just glitch a few times for sure. Like I'll spool it up, and it takes forever to like just thinking about it all.
Oh my gosh.
However that works. So yeah, the book will be talking about some stories to inspire people, to give them a vision, because we're all made unique, and so God's going to work in and through us in different ways. And I break it up into different contexts of the how, basically the why, the what, and the how. How does it work? What is netweaving, and the why of why we're called to be it. Now, the book itself is for a, quote, secular audience, but then I'll probably write another one that's more for a, quote, Christian audience, however you want to phrase it, with Christianese language, because I want it to be as broad as possible from an outreach standpoint, because I want to change the nomenclature, the culture of networking. Meeting someone becomes so transactional. It feels so contrived. It seems so narcissistic. And I believe that through potentially this book, I can help contribute to inspiring people to be so less transactional and much more intentional and authentic and more caring, and more genuine in relationships, and not expect anything out of it. That's really the key in some aspects. So yeah, it's chock full with sort of how-tos, how to open up a conversation, but it really starts from the inside out. So you have to ask God to really transform your heart, because he's the only one that can. The Holy Spirit's the only thing that can transform your heart, to sincerely love people well, to love your neighbor, care for them, to be in relationship with them. And so, whether it's the person at the front desk, whether it's the person at a restaurant as a waiter, or a flight attendant, I'm just curious. I just like just saying, so how are you doing? How do you like your job? Or are you based out of LA? Or are you based out of New York? And it's amazing when you genuinely care. Or my wife has a great way of, she whenever she sees a gal with nails, she goes, oh, I love your nails. Tell me about your nails. And why'd you pick that color? What's your name? And, oh, I love your name. What does your name mean? Especially if they're ethnic, right? They're like, oh, that's a beautiful name. In Ethiopian, what does that mean? So it just, there's different ways, but also, to be blunt, people can tell when you're not being sincere, right? And so you have to allow God to transform your heart, to have that sincerity and genuineness and authenticity, desire to know them. So that's just a taste of the book, but yeah.
When are you planning to publish it?
So we'll finish writing June. I'm doing a chapter a month, just going at it. And I don't know when I'm going to publish it. So I'm talking to different publishers. I'm toying with other ways to get it out there. What was really surprising too, Alicia, is really from millennials and younger. So many of them have shared, when I share stories about the book, we're hanging out, and they'll be like, hey, because, we don't know how to do that. We're like this, And I'm like, what do you mean this? They go, text me. I was like, oh my gosh. And we don't know how to have a natural conversation. We've never been modeled that well for us. And they said this book could really help bless us, just sort of figure out how to have that relationship. And part of it, some of the guys that I've talked to said, even like asking a girl out, it's kind of, we don't know how to do that. We'll like text them, or we'll start following them and being kind of creepy and like on their Instagram, and see if they're going out with anybody. And then maybe I'll send a note, I'm like, just ask her for coffee.
Yeah.
Well, how do I get there? Well, I want to ask her name, introduce yourself. And literally I have guys and gals just literally writing down notes. I'm like blown away by it. But the realization is that because of COVID and other things and just our cultures in the last 20, 30 years, and really it's the responsibility of us older folks that haven't really spent the time to really lift up, train, equip, model well relationships. Because in my generation, it's all transaction. It's all about networking, building the business, doing more ministry, getting the right speaking gigs, whatever it is that your space is in. And it's rarely about finding out, how are you really doing? How's life now? Anyway.
Well, I think what you said about, it really starts with the Lord working on your heart and how you see people and how you want to treat them. I really think that is the core. And then from there, what are the conversations you can have? What are the steps you can take to begin net weaving and to begin blessing others and to be blessed in return?
Yeah. Well, so I'll give you a little key here that I wrote in the book. One is I have this sort of, when you first meet a person, you don't know where to start, right? And so one would be, where are you from?
That's a good one.
Tell me about your family.
Yeah.
What's your future hopes and desires? When you start talking about that, you've hit pay dirt. I mean, you've built a trust with that person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you meet someone for the first time, it's super fun to see how God unfolds story, how they begin to open up. And that's a sacred trust, I call it. And you don't violate that. You don't share about what you've talked about with others. You keep it in prayer. You really start to treasure people's stories and doing it well. So, so that's kind of the from family, or also food. That's kind of a fun one. When you meet someone, so what kind of food do you like? Or if they're of another culture, you say, because I travel a lot overseas, but also here in the U.S. I mean, in Nashville, we have 140 languages spoken, right? I mean, Nashville, Tennessee, right? I asked them, so what's your favorite food? What did you grow up with? And you know what? That evokes so much memory and emotion and fun and frivolity. What do you do for fun? And that's another question. But when you talk about that, then they talk about their family and what that meant and what they ate together. And my favorite food is this because my mom used to make this and can't get it right now. And, it just, you start bonding and start connecting at such a deeper level. And it's a progression over time, right? So, relationships runs at the speed of trust. So trust has to be built over time. Trust can't be truncated or accelerated unless God's in it. And I've seen conversations where the trust is like, damn, right away, because something happens. Because in the Bible, it says deep speaks to deep, it says in the Bible. There's nothing hidden in the spirit. So sometimes the Lord, because of his timing, not our timing, wants us to connect with someone to come alongside of them at a deep level, fast. So I've seen that happen in my life. And I think it can happen for anybody. I've seen it happen for people through a quote, introverted, extroverted. Like, I have a friend that has a podcast that does Enneagrams. So he's like, hey, man, when you come out with the book, let's do different net weaving for different Enneagrams. I said, dude, that'd be super fun, So it's, it's a little boring.
So Kay, you've presented me with the keys, right, that you're going to be writing about in this book. So I got to pick up one of the keys.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
Tell me about your
my favorite food.
Well, that for sure. But also, what I really would love to know, Kay, is what are your future hopes and dreams?
Oh, great. Future hopes. So turning 60 was very monumental for me. It's kind of crept up on me pretty fast. And, when you're in your 20s and 30s, you're invincible, your 30s and 40s, you're starting to figure out you're not the only one out there. That you might have something to contribute. By your 50s and 60s, it starts getting into clarity of, oh, this is what I'm kind of good at. And I'm actually going to add value for the kingdom and people's lives and start moving to that. But when you hit 60, you start realizing, okay, I kind of know what I'm really good at. I definitely know what I'm not really bad at, which I have plenty of those. But what my future hopes and desires is pouring into younger generations. And I think this book and other things that I'll start creating here is really going to add value to their lives. So they don't have to go through some of the pain and hurt mistakes I went through in the last 40, 50 years. And also how they can be successful in the standpoint of not the worldly success, though it could happen, obviously, but I'm saying just successful in the Lord, and finish well, and really make a huge impact for the kingdom now rather than waiting till the end of their lives. So I'm really excited about doing that. I'm very excited about coming alongside of people in the areas of generosity. So I'm not talking about generosity in the standpoint of just money. There's 4 ways you can give. You can give, and I call it an acrostic of LIFE, life. So first one is your labor. So like you can go build a house in Tijuana, whatever, that kind of stuff. So labor. I is influence. So access to people, using your influence to help someone. F is finances. That's pretty obvious. And E is expertise. So maybe there's a certain expertise that God's given you. You can then give that as a gift. Is that in an area of generosity? So life, LIFE.
I'm writing this down, Kay.
Okay. Yeah. So helping people walk through that, of trying to figure out that generosity is really the reflection of, I believe, the character of God. For God so loved the world that he gave his only son. It's our divine DNA for us to be generous, like our Father.
So beautiful.
So how do we express that in our daily life? It can be in any of those 4 areas, or it might be more. I don't know. I mean, that acrostic is from my friend Pete Oakes, OCHS, he's an investment banker in the Midwest. And he not only has businesses all over, like a hydroelectric dam in Central America. He has business, but he has a really cool story. And you can look it up online. Pete Oakes, OCHS, of a business inside a prison.
Cool.
Super cool. It's a great story.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah.
Wow. So Kay, you're not church planting right now. You're not pastoring a church, but you're ministering to the next generation. Something you said to me before we started recording, you said, we're all called to ministry. And I think you're a walking testament to that.
Thanks, Alicia. I am on boards, so I serve on that. So I'm using my expertise and my influence in that area, as well as some finances. And so I am involved I'm very intentional in my life. I mean, if people can look at my LinkedIn and then they're welcome to go on my website. I've set up a website, kayhiramine.com. But my focus is on the Great Commission about souls and church planting, especially in the 1040 window, the hardest places. I've been to North Korea twice, right? So not a lot of people can say, and I've helped with church planting efforts there, Wow. So for me, I like to go the hardest, nastiest, ugliest places that the devil has taken over so that Jesus can be exalted and his light can shine in those areas of dark places. So I sit on boards that are very intentional. I sit on a board that's very intentional in planting churches and seeing people come to know Jesus through indigenous church planting efforts, meaning local people doing it, not some Westerners coming in, which would be killed right away if they went to some of these countries. So working with indigenous church planters to start the work. So I'm very committed to that. So I'm very passionate about that, generosity, church planting, church for soul, the Great Commission, and generosity are probably the 2 main things that I'm really focused on. And then the modality I do that by is supporting the younger people to raise them up to do that. That makes sense.
Yeah. Wow. So beautiful. Well, Kay, thank you for sharing your story with me, sharing your story with us, for sharing your hopes and dreams. I would love to talk to you again when your book comes out. I'd love to dig deeper into the keys. And there's a lot that we haven't dug into today from our conversation, like that encounter that you had with God that led you on that journey to explore and go to that church. There's, I think, a lot more to discuss. But thank you. Thank you for being so generous with your time and so generous with your story. I can't wait to see how your journey continues, especially as your book comes out, Kay.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you so much for the honor and blessing to be here. And most importantly, thank you for being in a relationship with me as my friend and partner in the gospel. So thank you, Alicia, for all you're doing through Faithfully and all the other myriad of other things that you do. I know that God has an amazing future and hope for you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Faithfully Stories podcast. We pray this episode gave you the encouragement you needed to continue on your journey. The Faithfully Stories podcast is brought to you by Faithfully, an online community committed to empowering church leaders, pastors, staff, and volunteers. The Faithfully digital platform offers innovative and practical tools and resources to enhance connection, foster collaboration, and promote growth within the church and ministry space. Remember to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help reach more listeners like you. Stay tuned for more uplifting tales from the front lines of ministry on the Faithfully podcast. Stay bold, stay faithful, and never underestimate the power of your own story.